So, as far as I know, we're out there and doing things, and people are watching. That's not really true, but they could.
Oh, they're
Um,
watching.
yeah, they will be, right? There's going to be a crowd. So, Roberta Coco, what a pleasure to be with you during the heartbeat of International Women's Month. How exciting!
Oh, it's great. It's great to be a woman, to be recognized for the whole entire month, right?
Dude, that's it. It was so fun last year. International Women's Day happened the same day as the time change when we reset the clock for daylight savings time. So y'all got screwed out of like an entire hour.
Whole hour. Yeah. I love
That
that you
I
know
don't know
that.
why I find that humorous, but I do. So tell me, we're going to talk about coaching.
Mhm.
And I know you have a video production background, and that was kind of your world. You got out of that and got into performance coaching. Like how or why? What drew you to the profession?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was just talking with someone about this a couple weeks ago. I I wasn't happy in my career, successful but not happy. That was a piece of it, and I ended up hiring a coach and really found my calling. The principles, the way that you can approach projects or turn problems into projects, kind of the discovery of who I really am, and learning to honor that and leverage my strengths. I mean, I I'm surprised that coaching wasn't like a bigger thing over the last 10, 20 years, right? It's just kind of come up and people have just started to realize it in the last 5. But it's one of the most powerful things that I've found when it comes to overcoming obstacles and creating satisfaction. So,
So there was a legendary coach in the Detroit area by the name of Barry Demp. I don't know if you've run across Barry. He moved to back to Pennsylvania a couple of 3 years ago, maybe four now. Barry was the guy who started the ICF in the Detroit area,
okay.
and probably back in '02, maybe somewhere in that time frame, maybe even late '90s. But Barry was sitting, he was an executive, he was a pharmaceutical sales rep. He was sitting watching the 1992 Olympics. And as he was watching, he kept seeing every single athlete going and talking to their coach.
Mhm.
Every athlete there had their own personal coach. And he said, why the heck don't business people have their own coach? So 32 years ago, Homeboy started his own coaching practice. I
Wow.
mean, that's some like OG original gangsta kind of stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I
Too.
didn't realize that. We're getting all this history today from you, Terry. I
Well,
love
it's
it. I
it's
love
the
it.
Ides of March. Speaking of, so if we want to get all Julius Caesar on it, we'll go way back in the day.
No, I didn't realize that, but it's so true, right? Coaching, and when I first started coaching, people wondered if that was what, like basketball, because I'm kind of tall. You can't tell in the box here. But
You
and
don't
then
look
I
that tall in this photo, this video.
right. And then I called myself a performance coach, and still do, right? Sometimes I identify as a performance coach also, and they would wonder if it was for theater. And it's like,
Hmm,
yeah,
that
yeah.
makes sense.
So, but it makes sense, or people connect coaching with that kind of performance or athletes and understand, right? The value in getting feedback on your performance, the value in being able to have somebody watching you specifically to identify where your strengths are and where your gaps are. And so I love, I got to write that guy's name down and do a little research, right, for bringing it into the professional realm.
He's got a cool book out called The Quotable Coach, and you can find Barry Demp right here on LinkedIn. So go check him out for sure. He's a heck of a good guy, a mensch, as it were. So, uh, performance coach. I'm glad you brought that up. So, life coach, executive coach, career coach, performance coach, relationship coach,
Business coach.
business coach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, how do I even know what kind of coach I want, Roberta?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great Great question. And it's a good question people should be asking, right? It's a good place to start. I think I wonder how you would answer that question. How do you even, because you do coaching as well, right? I
I
mean,
coach,
yeah,
have coach, will coach, do coach.
yeah. I think a lot of times people need to understand what it is that they don't have and what it is that they want, right? So, right, if I'm worried about my health, a health and wellness coach could be great for me.
Fitness coach. Yeah.
Coach, right? I like to work with people on a variety of in a variety of ways in a variety of industries, but usually they're tired, frustrated, stuck, capable of more, um, but want to get there faster, right? And so I don't really discriminate if it's relationship, business, right, career. But I do like to work with ambitious leaders. So when you're looking for a coach, really understanding the coach's niche and what they like to work with, I think is important. Would you agree?
I totally do. And I would start that conversation by what's the desired outcome, right? What are you hoping to achieve? So you said what are you missing? I say where are you trying to go?
Yeah.
Right? And then usually I find it best to work with people that have already been there. I'm curious if you've noticed this. I had Tip Quilter as a business coach 15 years ago, and Tip said something that dotted me right between the eyes so hard. I was like, get the hell out of my head, dude. And I'm like, seriously, how did you know that? And he said, if you spot it, you got it. And
Yeah.
I said, what now? What? He's like, I only can see it because I've already gone through it.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that most of the clients that work with me are behind me, but on a very similar path, right? They're trying to make the same changes in their life, whether it's business or relationships or wellness, that I've made in mine. And so it's real easy to find a coach who's been there, done that, and most importantly, willing to turn around and shine the light so you don't step in the hole that's going to take you 3 months to get out, right? You fall off a cliff. So
Yeah.
they can really help you in that respect. So I definitely think checking out the coach's background, what experiences they've had, is really, really important. You know, I do you I tell people all the time two things. One, my job is to hold up the mirror, right? I want you to see yourself not as you want to be, not as you're scared of being, not as you hope to get to one day, but as you are right now. And then we map to where you want to go, right? That's the goal. But if we can't be honest about what shows up in the mirror, we're never going to get to where we want to go. And the other thing is I coach as much by gut as I do by experience and through reading and knowledge and stuff I've accumulated. I'm very intuitive because I always think of myself as a conduit that's channeling the information that you hear,
Yeah.
right? Or that you need to hear. I don't take credit when I'm speaking, when I'm writing. I'm like, no, dude, I'm just a conduit for the information that needs to pour out. Do you do that or is it different for you?
Yeah. Well, I love so much what you just said. So one one of our jobs, and as I see it for me also, is to continue to learn, to continue to dive in, read books, listen to people that are smarter than I am in different areas, and then be able to identify what my client needs and share that information, right? So Johnny on the spot for that. When it comes to what you initially started talking about, though, if you spot it, you got it. Yes. Uh, One of the things that I think makes the work we do so powerful is the depth that we've gone to in our own lives. Like, if I haven't been there, how am I going to lead you through it? And so, really, a lot of the coaching works, a lot of that discovery, I think, right, um, is like, was I willing to go there in my own life and my own journey, kind of uncover some of that with blind spots or discomfort, right? And walk through it with courage. And then we get to show up without the judgment because it's like, hey, I've been there. We get to show up cheering them on, like, I know you can get through it, right? And it's not a place of shame or blame or where you have to hide, right? It's a very sacred space. And I think it is one of the things that can be lacking sometimes, right? Is when people are just after the results or just after a process and they miss kind of that soul part of the work. So,
Yeah, without question, right? Because it's a journey, and like any great trip you've ever been on, the destination's cool, but normally the best stories happen on the way there.
yeah, yeah,
And it's unfortunate, sorry to alert you, there's no easy button. Just because you hire someone who's been there and done that, um, really, really good coaches aren't going to do it for you. Those
right,
people call themselves consultants, right?
right,
So
right.
understand the distinction between the two,
Yeah,
right? A coach is going to help you get there through helping you find the answers you need to make the progress you want, and then probably hold you accountable and keep the fire under your butt to do the stuff you said you needed to do.
yeah.
A consultant may actually get in, roll up their sleeves, and go do the thing. And so you don't have to. And to me, that's a huge distinction. How do you distinguish between the two?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think it's tempting as a coach sometimes to put the consultant hat on. And I'll even say that with my clients, like, okay, I can take my coaching hat off, but that's not my area of expertise. I don't show up with a bullet point plan for them to follow. I'm not coming here saying, I know how to build your business. I'm actually coming here saying, I think you're the expert. And I need to be careful that I'm not lifting the weight for them because then I'm going to start building the muscle. And it's really my job to help them build the muscle, right?
I think that's spot on. I actually billed myself for several years as a coach consultant, right? Because there are times when I was going to pull the information out of you, and there was times I was going to cram the information into you. And
Yeah.
that was, for me, that's the distinction,
Mhm.
right? If I'm telling you what to do, I'm consulting. If I'm helping you find your answers,
Right.
coaching.
Yeah. And I was just on a call with someone like a potential client and they really thought that I was going to have the answers, right? They were interviewing me to see if I could build their business for them. Which I thought if I could do that, why don't I just have your business, right? But I was inviting them into that understanding where when we uncover some of the things that have been holding you back, right? Some of the strategies that you used to use that aren't working anymore and you don't realize it, right? So they're getting in the way. That's going to be a value that you're going to be able to carry on 10, 20 years from now. You're going to be able to overlay all the lessons that you learn in everything that you encounter moving forward. And so the skills that we bring aren't solutions, they're resources, right? And I think for some people, uh, like we need to make sure that we are educating, right? That they understand that.
100%, because I think it's kind of a nebulous term. I mean, let's be honest. The bar to get into coaching is I'm a coach,
Stop it.
right?
Just
Huh?
yes. Yeah.
There's no bar.
Have coffee, will coach. So,
Yeah. And listen, that's not I'm not that's not a bad thing, right? If you have a heart to serve, a mind that sees things differently, and a gut that's going to be strong enough to stand and hold space for people, you can be a coach. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You don't need certifications. There's no I'm going to school for 4 years and I have my coaching degree. That's not a thing.
right.
All that said, you ever run into bad coaches?
Yeah.
She's like, I ain't answered that shit. I'm this is recorded.
Well, as a coach, I hire coaches to work with, right? And sometimes they're coaches, sometimes they're therapists, sometimes they're consultants. I like to have people, not just resources, not just books, right? That enrich who I am, that challenge and push, invite me into uncomfortable spaces to learn and grow. And there are times where it's a little disappointing, right? When I encounter someone and it's like, I want them to challenge me more. I want them to listen and hear what I can't hear. And so yeah, I think there's people in our profession that that bring all different kinds of experiences to the table. Is
Well,
that a good?
and occasionally not enough experiences to the table.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly, and that is a great reminder to me, right? When I jump into a call that I'm less than satisfied with, when someone's coaching me, it helps me remember, right, what the power is that a coach really brings, and to stay grounded.
So you said a couple of CH words that I want to dive into. You said challenge and you said cheer. And so, of those two, which do you think you're better at? Do you think you're better at challenging people or cheering them on?
Ooh, gosh, I don't know if I'm better at one or the other,
Okay.
but I think what I'm skilled at is inviting people to recognize what is more valuable to them, right? What do they need? And I'm thinking specifically, I had a very powerful CEO, right? Who was completely controlled by his, I'm going to be a little dramatic because he was, but completely controlled by his calendar, right? Overwhelmed, stressed out, didn't feel appreciated. And I got prescriptive. Usually I'm not prescriptive, but I was like, you need to take the rest of the day off and go golfing. Like, you need to embrace your personal power. You need to remind yourself that you're the leader and everybody else. And you need to step into, like, if you can't take the afternoon off, that's really what we need to be talking about. So it was like a challenge slash celebration, right? Embrace your power. And can you?
I think that's a really, really important lesson. So I'm glad that you did that. Did they golf? Did they
Uh,
go?
they scheduled it that afternoon. I remember he sent me a text and he's like, I can't get on the course today, but I'm going like Thursday or whatever. And it
Okay.
was it was a it was a big shift in his leadership, right? Because he needed to step into some things, and he needed to invite his team to step into some things. So, and
Nice.
step out of things, right? Like shame or judgment or, right, fear of letting go.
I that's interesting. Having experienced your coaching, I will tell you that you do an exceptional job of challenging people and ask very insightful questions and aren't afraid to blow the whistle and call BS at the times when it's needed. I try and do better at that.
I feel like somehow you turned that on me, because when we first talked, I remember that was your favorite word that day, was
It
try.
was it was a rough day. I was just trying to do my best. Girl literally shows up, has a little whiteboard next to her, and at one point she pulls it in the screen for focus, and she's got the word try written with 6 little hash marks. It evidently happened so frequently that day, ladies and gentlemen, that she started a count for me. So I was
Yeah,
in a little different space then than I am today.
yeah.
Although literally my business name, Try Bean.
Right.
So it's like part of my brand at this point.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, like, we all have these little ticks in our language, and they can show up on different days. That's another reason to have a coach, to have someone stand with you, because you're capable. One of the things that I love about you as I've gotten to know you and as I watch you online and see what you're doing, you experiment with all kinds of things. You bring that like curiosity and adventure and enthusiasm into your work and into my world and into all of our worlds. So thank you. Right. And some of that is the willingness to try or to experiment, right? Yeah, the caveat is when you're like trying to do it and you let yourself off the hook instead of being committed, right? There's the distinction.
Oh yeah.
And so having somebody, right, show up and just kind of point the spotlight like, hey, wait a second, are you experimenting or are you like letting yourself off the hook with that word?
And that's a really, really excellent distinction in knowing my headspace and where I was and what was going on at the time we had that call. It wasn't experimentation. It was like, girl, I'm just trying to do my best here. That was, it was, yeah, it's all good. I appreciate that though, because it's an important way to look at it, right? If you're, and this is something I've recognized in the last few weeks. Over the last 4 months, I've been cranking, right? I've been really focused on actually having a business as opposed to plain business. And that experimentation piece is, am I speaking, am I training, am I coaching, or training or speaking? And I've never gotten the clarity I want on that. And one day it finally dawned on me that I'm looking at the wrong level of abstraction, right? The coaching, speaking, and training are mediums for delivering ideas and opportunities for growth, right? So if I'm walking around talking about I'm a coach or I'm a trainer, no, man, I'm a guy that's going to help you grow, right? Whether it's you, whether it's your brand, whether it's your business, that's my actual world, is helping you find the clarity on where you want to go, and then helping you map that destination through the steps and processes, and then wearing my pointy ass cowboy boots to kick you in the butt when you're not holding yourself accountable. I'll do that for you. So that's kind of the space I like to play in. But and this is a technical coaching term, the skullfuckery that went on trying to find which one of those things, you use that term, right? Technical coaching term.
I neither deny or agree with with the fact that I might use that term or however that's said.
I'm going to say the over under is 10 days before that shows up in a Roberto Cocco coaching session. Um, the it was the wrong question, right? And I think one of the best things that coaches bring to the table is the right questions, right? That Barry Demp used to always say, let your questions do the heavy lifting, right? That's where the work is. And you mentioned the idea of being active in your listening, so that, or having a coach that's at least active in their listening, so they're guiding that conversation not based on a set of 10 pre-filled out questions that are a checklist that need to get answered, but in real time. I think coaches need to be exceptionally present.
Yeah, absolutely. And knowing when to hold the silence and anchor into a question that somebody might be trying to get away from. Right. I love if I ask you a what question and you answer a how question, right? Or I ask you a how question and you tell me why. And I'm like, like, so starting to notice like what people might be not even realizing that they're avoiding, right? And just continuing to ask that same question. And I love, if I can just say this, that you just described like who you are. You're a guy who helps you grow. That's who you are, as opposed to trying to define a title. And I think that that can really be such an asset when we anchor into who we are. And then out of that, what we do happens maybe quite naturally. And people can get really distracted trying to define what they want to do instead of like just focusing and centering. Again, it's like that work, like knowing who you are and the value that you bring.
You may have seen this image of a license plate that reads "Now Our,"
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so before you even said knowing who you are, over my shoulder here, there's a little bit of blank yellow space, and that license plate hangs in my guest room.
Mm.
And I'm thinking it needs to relocate up here behind my head. And the license plate literally means know who you are. It's not now our, which is good advice, right? Stay present, good advice, but it's know who you are.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm like, I got to move that. And then you said, knowing who you are. I'm like, see, right
Yeah.
on cue.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's one of those things that we can get really distracted from, and we're answering the wrong question. Right? It's not what do I need to do? It comes back to where do you want to go? What matters to you? Who are you?
Yeah.
Right? And then we can work on the strategy. Then we can work on the action steps. Otherwise, we're like, I met this nice disco ball last week. He had lights and he was throwing them in all the directions, which is kind of like, disco balls are fun, but like lasers are focused.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times we throw our light all over the place. And I think a coach, again, can help funnel that down into something specific and clear.
Have you ever described me as a disco ball? Because I don't feel attacked by that, but I'm like,
Yeah.
I've been very disco ballish at times.
Yeah. Well, a disco ball, it's like they're fun to be around. It's exciting.
Check.
It's a party.
Check.
Yeah. And so there's a place for, all of us maybe want to have a little disco ball in us. But when it comes to when you're feeling distracted or when you're wondering why you can't get what you want done, it's like, maybe you're throwing your light in too many directions.
Mm-hmm. Maybe turn down the Gloria Gaynor. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I think I got you.
Yeah.
Put on a little Red Rider, a little lunatic fringe. Go.
We need like somebody cue the music.
That's awesome. Wow, Gloria Gaynor and lunatic fringe in the same sentence. I didn't see that coming today. All right, so how should one? Well, let's start with who needs coaching. Let's ask a simple question and put that out there.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question because we're jumping off of like the most valuable questions or questions that we bring. I think every single person would benefit from a coach, right? I don't think there's anyone out there who couldn't create more value, more insight, more awareness in themselves. But I'm always looking for someone who's willing and who wants that kind of next level performance, right? That kind of deeper understanding. And so I would say people who aren't willing or aren't comfortable settling.
Oh, I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
There's as a performance coach who coaches, executive type people a lot of times,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to remember the book, The Law of the Lid. It was a leadership lesson, and it may have been from Maxwell, that talked about the idea that from a leadership perspective, if you score a leader 1 through 10, okay, and you score the rest of the team 1 through 10, if your leader's a 7, you're not going to have an 8 or a 9 or a 10 working for a 7 for very long. It's not a thing, right? If their leadership score is higher than their leader's score, they're either going to get frustrated and bail, or they're going to end up usurping that person's job, which makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, how does that show up in coaching? If you're working with a powerful executive, do you ever notice that? Is it a thing?
So you're asking like if are you asking specifically about their leadership or their teams being more equipped in?
I'm asking, can a coach with a leadership score of 6 coach someone who has a leadership score of 9?
Oh, okay. Okay. Um yeah, I would think based on going back to the original one of the original things that we talked about, right? Like it's about the person being coached, being able to lift the weight. And so there's a lot of different aspects when it comes to leadership, and we do want to be able to bring them places that we've been, but we also just need as a coach to be able to ask some courageous questions, right? Be willing to be uncomfortable and invite people into discomfort. I think one of the things that I watch out in my own coaching is if I get and hear my intent, maybe not the exact words that I use, but if I have too much compassion for someone, like if I start to empathize with them a little too much and understand, then I'm going to go easy on them,
Mm.
right? And that's not what they're hiring me for. So, in that regard, as it relates to if leadership is translated as courage and willing to stand in discomfort, then just I think a coach needs that, right? To serve their clients well.
I love how you frame that, and I think that's so important, right? The courageous question part for sure, and then the guts to keep your mouth shut and let them answer,
Yeah.
right? The challenge is conversation can get really uncomfortable, and uncomfortable conversations turns out by nature are uncomfortable, and there needs to be silence at times. And
Mhm.
lousy coaches don't like that. They want to fill the silence. But then anytime I've ever coached somebody when I'm giving them more of the answers than they're giving me,
Yeah.
it's a failing recipe, because, quite frankly, if they didn't conceive the idea, the likelihood of them buying into it and actually executing on it goes down. Do you
Yeah.
agree?
No, I totally agree. I mean, we all have heard all the answers already,
Ooh, true story.
right? And
Yeah.
it's just it's when they land with us, right? It's that moment of like, have you ever felt it? It's like, oh, 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 please stop talking. Like, I just need to breathe through this one. And that's when it matters, right? That's when it's impactful.
I was in a conversation once talking about, have you ever felt it? I was talking to this lady, and then she started talking about a disco ball, and it just really messed me up. It was like, yo, listen here, shining brightly. Sorry.
But I mean, would you agree um when you hear something, right, and it makes sense to you is different than when you find the answer yourself. It's like, oh, then it just connects to a lot deeper places again.
100%, right? If it's, and this is, and I don't know if I said this as succinctly earlier. Consultants put stuff in you, coaches pull stuff out of you, right? And so if I'm putting it in,
Mhm.
right, it's starting here, right? It starts in your mind and then starts to spread down. If I'm putting it in, it starts in your gut, or it starts in your heart, and it fills your head kind of simultaneously. If excuse me, if I'm pulling it from you, I should say, right? It's in your essence of your being. So it's like all the cells light up at once, and it's a totally different experience.
Mhm. Have you ever this happens to me sometimes in my coaching when I'm being coached too. And I take notes. I love to take notes. And then I'll go back, like I'll have this great session where I had all these different insights, these feelings, different, dots were connected. And then I go back on my notes and I'm like, the notes weren't as powerful as the experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I liken it to that, right? It's like when I read it and see it or hear it, it wasn't as powerful as living it. And so I really want my clients to have that experience, right? It's not just me, downloading my expertise or my, my thoughts, but it's like creating that space so that they can really live with the question. And I love when they try to explain what's happening and it's hard to get the words because it's so meaningful. Or they'll say like, do you understand that? And I'm like, do you understand it?
Is it my job to understand it, or is it more important for you to understand it? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I would like to point out that you only understand it because I understood it, but that's not really about you. So let's just keep moving. And that's the funny piece, right? It's almost as if the old line, a good attorney never asks a question they don't know the answer to, right?
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of times coaches, we may play like, oh yeah, well, I don't really know. Let's just figure it out. We're taking you on a journey, man. We already know where the end result is. We just have to wait until you catch up.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, and that's the part of like knowing, having been there ourselves.
Right.
Right. And I would say I'm not always sure what they're gonna find, but I feel like because I don't want to lead them right into a corner, right?
Oh, yeah,
Then
can't.
we get back into like that consulting thing, like there's only one right answer. But it is like interesting to kind of if you saw it, you got it, or what was that?
If you spot it, you got it.
Got it, you got it. It's like, oh, I think I see what's going on there, and then continuing to invite them with that neutrality, right? Like no judgment, take it slow. I always like to ease into things like hot jacuzzis, right? Just nice and slow, and let it kind of simmer with them,
I think that's important, right? Because you really can't rush the process.
Mhm.
Even though you might know where the process is going,
Yeah.
right? Like, I don't necessarily enjoy coaching people whose I have a bigger vision for their lives than they do, right? That becomes a challenge. I decided a few years back that I only want to coach people that have a seventh gear, right? So if you think about a manual transmission, cars had 5 speeds, right?
Right.
Super sports cars have 6 speeds,
Mhm.
right? I want people that have that seventh speed. I want, right? Because I know, like as a coach, there's nothing more frustrating than getting agreement on next steps and actions and priorities that you, as the client, said were important and that you were going to take. And then week after week after week of the accountability and the follow up, and no, I didn't do that because of this, and no, I didn't do that because of that. And then 2, 3, 4, 6 months down the road, they're like, hey, this coaching isn't really working.
Right.
It's clearly the coaching.
Yeah. Have you ever wanted to fire a client?
Well, not as much as I've fired clients, for sure. Right? Yeah. I tell people all the time, listen, the best day of your week is the day you fired that client. And they're like, what? And I'm like, if you think about the thought process that goes into, I might need to fire this person. If you even contemplated that, that means that they have sucked way too much time, way too much energy, way too much mental bandwidth, that you're like, I think they need to go. I'd rather not deal with them than get their money, right? They have to suck pretty hard for that to be the case. And so when you do fire them, it's a
Yeah.
pretty good day.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great opportunity for people to experience a different kind of growth also, right? Like,
Yeah.
so in their best interest, I might fire them so that they recognize we're just treading water together. Right. And so it's not a benefit. And that's kind of interesting. We were talking last week a little bit. There's some complaints, what I would call some consistent complaints in the world of business, right? Where people keep saying they want different, but they're continuing to tolerate where they're at. And I wonder if you would agree with this. As a coach, I feel like I have all of the goodies, right? I have this bag full of powerful principles that work, right? I have the courage to stand with you. I have the stamina to put up with your bullshit at times, right? Lovingly with fun,
Loving you
right?
because
Like
I care.
because I care. And I can see potential in organizations, in leaders, in teams, but it's like they would rather protect their complaint and just be able to continue to complain about it than step out and do what's necessary, whether that's hiring me or someone like me, right? When I have a conversation, it's like, oh yes, we could get something done. And they're like, well, I'm going to have to think about it.
Right.
And it's like, okay, you just keep that complaint.
You're either committed to making the change or you're committed to keeping the complaint.
Yeah.
Right. And it's in both are fine.
Yeah.
Right. But maybe stop fooling yourself just for a little while.
Yeah.
Right. Just for a little while. Give it up. See what happens.
Yeah.
Right. Say, I embrace this complaint. I love it. It's my favorite.
Right.
You
Right.
know, go
Yeah.
all Tommy Boy on it. My little pet.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that's the power in just letting them go. Like I just go. Enjoy your complaint. Come back to me if you want to when you're ready.
Yeah.
To let go of it.
I love that. I love that. All right, let's talk attributes and or skills. You pick, would you prefer? Name 3 or 5 attributes or skills that you think a great coach possesses.
Great coach attributes. Listening, right? Listening to you. They're listening.
Ooh, go on.
So it's important, like I can listen, but if I'm listening to how I'm listening, right, then I'm creating a deeper awareness and then I'm going to serve you more powerfully, right? So listening is important. Neutrality. So one of the biggest compliments I ever had from a client was, you're the only person in my life who doesn't have an agenda for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's really powerful. And the willingness to be wrong, big, right? So sometimes I step into very uncomfortable conversations, right? And with courage, willing to completely be wrong about it, right? And so in regard to that, because you said 3 or 5, that would be 3. Developing a relationship with the client, developing trust. So I can say to my client, like, I'm willing to be wrong about this and I want your best. I just want to pull the curtain back and ask how this lands. And then I kind of got to say something that maybe no one's ever said to them before. And it's risky.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
I think that's so interesting, like that whole idea of permission-based coaching, right? Because there are times that if you're doing what's best for the client, you're gonna end up punching them straight in the gut.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So
In love.
what's that?
In love.
Yeah, in love, right? Yeah, it's the hardest gut punch lovingly that you've ever received. But it's again, it's in the idea and toward the precipices of getting to where you want to go. And a lot of times I think smart people go into coaching with the idea that I've got blind spots, and especially in the executive world where you're surrounded by yes people who
Mhm.
aren't going to point out those blind spots.
Right.
You want a coach that's willing to dot you between the eyes every now and again.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is, it's really interesting when I get to the end of a call, with potential clients or with my clients. My standard question usually is, what was most valuable? And that isn't so that they can give me any accolades, but it's so that they can start to understand in that time what was valuable, right? And so they can grab onto it, remember it, right? Poke around at it. But so often, especially in initial calls when I'm getting to know someone, their comment is that you called me out, right? And it like always surprises me, never surprises me,
Right.
if that makes sense. And it's
100%.
yeah, it's yeah, because that's what they want, but they need the right environment, like we all do. You don't want to be called out in the middle of a board meeting. You don't want to be called out, in front of your someone you're trying to impress, or right, that a big deal. Look at your little puppy.
Isn't he cute?
He is adorable.
He
But
is.
but
I,
yeah, so just I think that is it's again just one of the things that we get to offer people. And it takes courage on both parts.
I think that's so important, right? And I love the wrap up. What's the one valuable takeaway, or what's the one thing you're going to focus on, or what added most value to you today? Because I think it resets and reprioritizes how they may move forward, right? So it's a good recall technique. We do it with training a lot of times too,
Mhm.
and it really kind of helps cement
Yeah.
what happened, and I think that's really important. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the who, we've talked a little bit about the what. Have we really touched on, we haven't really touched on the how, but have we touched on the why? Do we feel comfortable that why coaching is important?
Um, yeah, that's interesting. Why is it important? Um, I, I really think if maybe just for like a hot second, and I'd love to hear your take on this too, but if we a lot of humans, a lot of people, including myself, I think we're driving towards being happy, being comfortable, right? Like I think that's how we define arriving, like having a good life. But we actually aren't designed to be comfortable, right? Like
Mhm.
you get uncomfortable after a while sitting on the couch, or the older I get, the less time I can spend sleeping, because it's just uncomfortable. But so I think coaching invites us to discover what we're capable of. I think it calls to that adventurous spirit that we all have, to discover, to explore, to wonder. Um, and if we don't have something like that in our life, if we're allowed to get, or if we allow ourselves to get complacent, right? Just that monotony can really create some dissatisfaction, maybe some depression, maybe some, just feeling like purposeless or meaningless, right? And I don't want to suppose that on anybody, right? But I think that for me anyhow, the coaching really brings about, like, the why coaching is to find the why it all matters.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I lead with clarity, right? That's what you're gonna get from me
Mhm.
is clarity on the next step, the next three steps. I'm gonna help you prioritize all the BS you have in your head that's stopping you from making a decision because you're what ifing yourself to death right? So why is, for me anyway, is to help you be more confident. And to your earlier point, yeah, I might be wrong, right? And this is exactly what I think. Boom, 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 boom. And I'm willing to be totally wrong. And people look at you like, what? You just were absolutely declarative and you might not know what the hell you're talking about. Totally true. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
100% it. Right. But I'm pretty sure. I have a high level of almost perfect certainty. And but it's true, right? And you said earlier about experimentation. And to me, the entire life's a science experiment. The
Mm,
whole, like, our existence here in this time, in this place, is experimental, right?
yeah.
Like, unless someone can definitively tell me why we're here, good luck with that. I'm gonna look at it like a giant petri dish and a Bunsen burner, and let's go create some stuff, and maybe we blow some shit up, and maybe we make something great along the way. And I'm equally willing to do both in my own life. I try not to blow any stuff up for anybody else, right? I'll let you carry the dynamite for your life.
Yeah.
But in my life, like, nothing that bad is ever going to happen. It's just
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that could happen? Death. Okay, well then, probably not going to prepare for that too much more than I already have.
Mhm.
I think it's all right. I think I'm maybe reckless though, so super fun, like a disco ball.
Like
Um,
a
so I want to bounce an idea off of you real quick.
sure.
I niche, and you'll be rich, 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 right? I learned that from a friend, Aska, when she was on my podcast a decade ago. I love that line. And all we hear about is niching and niching and niching. And I feel, and my wife pointed this out yesterday. We were talking about 313D Love, which eventually morphed into Detroit Day and 313 Day, where we celebrate Detroit on March 13th. I actually started that like years and years ago, branded it poorly, but it evolved and did what it needed to do. And now there's celebrations and parties throughout the city. It's really cool.
Nice.
And I was telling my wife, I'm like, I let that down. I put that mantle down in 2016, and I haven't felt like the same calling, the same passion, the same energy. So I put it down in 2016, but I picked it up in 2007. And the amount of energy work and the amount of ho'oponopono and the amount of effort I put toward changing the collective consciousness in this city was a 9-year process, and I was called to it and through it and for it. And I was here for it. It was great. And then I'm like, it's done. The work that I needed to do. People now see Detroit with love. That was all I wanted to do.
Mm.
Um,
So great, by the way. So great. I mean, just to shout out and acknowledge you for a minute too. You've done a lot of building, community building, relationship building. You're such a great example of shouting out to different people, even to cities, right? To create awareness and love and honor them. That's another thing that I admire about you and part of the work that you do, right? Or the outflowing of who you are is just to really create space for people and acknowledgement for people.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
it's great. It's,
That's very kind. That's very kind. So my wife said, I've noticed you posting about all these women over the past week or so. And you seem to have a ton of passion and energy about that. And I was like, it's funny you say that. I met a female coach 4 months ago who focuses on coaching men. And I thought, I'd really like to coach women. I like coaching women leaders because they generally know what they want. They generally are they have 8 speeds, forget 7, they might have 12,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They're driven, they're focused, they do the work, they prioritize what matters, with the exception of themselves, right? Self-care is something that they most all collectively need more of. Um, but I was really like, that's an interesting idea. You know me pretty well. What do you think?
Mhm. Yeah, I think, what do I think about you coaching women?
Yeah, and it's not like I half of my clients are women, so it's not unheard of.
Yeah, but
But
like as a niche.
but
Uh,
as a practical space to spend time and group to speak specifically to.
mhm. Yeah. I think that would be great. You do bring uh, some excitement and energy and fun, right, to all your conversations, to your trainings, to the things that you offer. And I do think that that is, and being a man, I don't want to like be too dogmatic about this, right? But it's great as a professional, accomplished woman to stand with a professional, accomplished man and feel respected and valued and like a peer, right? Without any kind of,
Without the judgment, without the BS.
yeah. And so I think there's a lot of validation, and I don't want to use like the word comfort, but there's something that happens, and if you can bring that space to women, it validates their power, and it gives them an experience so that they can step out into that more powerful self.
Yeah, so it's interesting to me because we talked about the idea of having someone that's already been there. And so for me, it's a little bit disingenuous because I've never been a female executive leader, right? But I have lots of perspective, right? Being fairly observant, being a fairly good communicator, and a couple of years of experience at this point. So anyway, we may will pick that up, on a different therapy session. But it was on. It's top of mind. It was a last night conversation.
Yeah, no, I'd love to have a deeper conversation with that, and really explore, right? Get clear on it.
Yes. So, all right. I know we're wrapping up. We're coming to the top of the hour. You got big things to do at 10 a.m. What? Well, how about where? Where do the people find you, Roberta Cocco?
Well, my LinkedIn profile, I think that's a great place to find and connect me. I really enjoy that platform. But my website, robertacocco.com, you can find me there. I love to invite people into complimentary strategy calls, right? Where I get to find out what they're up to, offer them some value, build my network, kind of serve. And so, yeah, you can find me online.
She's posting great content on LinkedIn. You will learn. Occasionally you'll smile. Sometimes you'll feel like you might have gotten punched in the gut a little bit. But those are things that are going to help you grow, people. So go connect with Roberta Cocco. If you're looking for me, linkedin.com/n/Terry Bean. Real easy to find here on the LinkedIn-ness. Also, trybean.com. That's try as in give it a try, not 3 of me. We do not want 3 of me. So trybean.com, lots of information, speaker reel, how I coach and what goes on there. You are flipping awesome. Thank you for joining me, Roberta. And to anyone that's still sitting here watching us, you guys are pretty awesome too. And we appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me out. It's always good to have a conversation with you and get to just kind of kick it around. And I would echo that if anybody's watched us to the end, like, thank you. Hope you enjoyed it. Love to know what was most valuable.
Ooh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
All right, you have a wonderful rest of the day and we'll chat soon.
All right. Thanks, Terry. You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.